Hi everyone, welcome to the Empower Sounds podcast. My name is Mahika and today we're joined by the incredible Sandy Aziz, lawyer, fashion writer, and overall girl boss. We're going to talk about Sandy's journey into law and fashion and writing and how she balances it all. I hope that you learn, I hope that you laugh, and I hope that you enjoy. Let me know what you think on the podcast Instagram, and yeah, let's get started.
Awesome. Well, Sandy, welcome to the podcast. Can you please start by introducing yourself?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. What an honor, truly. My name is Sandy, as you know, but I am originally Egyptian from Texas as well, and have lived in London now for about almost 8 years. And I am a lawyer by trade, and I am also a freelance journalist and have written for loads of different publications over the last, I'd say, almost 10 years. And yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, we're going to now dive into all of the brilliant things that you've been doing, both before you moved to London and now. So, can you please tell us a little bit more about your background in law and how you got both into US and EU competition law and international trade?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I love when people know what area of law because whenever I say that I'm an antitrust and competition lawyer, they're like, "What? What does that mean?" Um, so actually, it's a very interesting story. So I actually went to undergrad at the University of Texas in Austin. This was 17-year-old me. I had graduated high school a little earlier and went to university and thought, I love literature. And I've always thought I want to defend the defenseless. So I knew I wanted to do law, but the way that it works in the US is you can do your undergrad and you can be whatever. Like I can do literature, but then I could be pre-law, or I could do like medicine and be pre-law. So the idea is that you can sort of do whatever. So I thought, oh, this is perfect for me. So I got to do literature, and I studied literature and I loved it and was writing poetry in my free time and stuff. But then I was also getting to like, do some of the prerequisite courses that sort of set you up for law. And once you're finished with your undergrad, then you obviously you apply for law school, and it's a post like doctorate program for law. So it's super competitive. I'm not gonna lie to you, like even though I was like a pretty straight A student at university and like tried my hardest and did my best with all the extracurriculars and things, getting into law school is no easy feat in the US. So I actually had applied to like 7 or 8 schools, and I got 7 rejection letters. And what's also bizarre is I graduated university a semester early, which you can do. And I thought that was for me a way to take some time off and just get to do some stuff that I love, like writing and also just hanging out with the family. So I moved back to my parents um, in like December, right? So I was going to be home from December through to August, and then law school would be starting in August of that year. But yeah, so funny enough, I went home and like I was doing all these things, but I was getting all these rejection letters, and I thought, oh my goodness, like what's gonna happen? Because if you don't get in for that run, you have to wait another year. And so I was obsessing and moping on my dad's couch, and I think kind of when I let go of the obsessing over, oh my God, I didn't get into law school. What am I going to do? That's when things always work out, right? So it was in that moment that I was actually in Italy, with my aunt and uncle. My dad basically was like, stop moping and, go and spend some time in Italy with your aunt, uncle, and cousins and like learn something productive. Like I think he just hated the fact that I was just sitting around moping. So that was actually really, really good for my mental health and my cooking skills because that's where when I learned how to cook. And I think I just let go and I forget that that was such a privilege, right? But such an incredible time because I hadn't checked my email. This was like you had to go to internet cafes. This is also showing my age, but you had to go to internet cafes and check your email. So I literally had not, one of the schools, the last school, the eighth school that I hadn't been rejected to yet, by the way, I got a wait list. So what waitlist means is it's not a no, but it's not a yes. So if someone else doesn't accept their offer or whatnot to that school, then there might be a position for you. Usually they come at kind of like the last minute. So I sort of took that as I didn't get in. But anyway, so I'm in Italy, hadn't checked my email for a couple months, and then my mom comes and it's like July, okay? And she's like, "Have you checked your emails?" I'm like, "No, not in like 2 or 3 months." We go to the internet cafe. I'm checking my emails like nonchalantly. And I'm just going through them, and then I see an email and it's like, "Congratulations, you are off the wait list at the University of Texas School of Law, sorry, Texas Tech School of Law." And I just, I mean, I just like freaked out because I was like, I'm going to law school. So anyway, fast forward, I went to law school. It was the worst 3 years of my life. Funny that you want something so badly, but it was the way that law school is in the US, it's like Socratic method. It's quite, the way that it's built, the system is they teach you how to be a lawyer. And I think I just never really understood it. But I struggled because I am such a creative that it was not really the space to like, for that environment. So outside of law school, I was still obviously writing and stuff. But so I'm in law school, I'm like, trust the process because, this is just the like equipping me with what I need. It doesn't mean like this is how it's going to be when I am a lawyer. So I did that for 3 years, graduated, but got to spend some time at Cambridge University during that time. And that's when I studied international human rights and European Union law. And that was kind of like my intro to European. So I just loved it. I loved it so much that I was like, I want to be an international lawyer. I want to do this on an international scale, and I want to see how the different legislative frameworks sort of come together and how they interact, if they do interact, and how does the world move as we know it. So that was like my intro, loved it, and then got went back, finished law school in Texas, became an associate and all that, but got into this program that was international commercial and competition law for your master's at UEA in Norwich. And that program for me, I mean, everybody, I'm telling you, everybody that I went to law school with, because you get your doctorate in law. So everybody was like so skeptical about why this like person now who's basically a qualified Texas lawyer with like a Juris Doctorate in law, a bachelor's in literature, and a master's in business, while all of a sudden I'm going back to school like sort of backwards to get a master's. And I think they just didn't understand it. And in my mind, I did it with such conviction. I don't know if it was a false sense of confidence, but I really believed in what I was doing and thinking and saying. And I think what the end goal was, and that was the purpose that I was focusing on, was I want to be an international lawyer. And like that was the goal. So anyway, I go and I do this master's program at UEA Norwich. Absolute best decision I've made. I actually really enjoyed that year of studying. And I think I would have really honestly been so upset if I didn't do that, because that was the one year in my entire legal education, I would say, where I actually got to engage with the law and like in a way where you were actually learning things, no shade on US law school education, but genuinely, this was all about you thinking about the areas of law and how they interact, and it was comparative. So it was the US, the UK, and the EU frameworks. And I thought I was going to the program was commercial and competition law. I thought I was going to be a commercial lawyer. And my like mentor at the time, who is now like the head of the law school there, and he's amazing. His name is Andreas. He honestly got me to fall in love with competition law. So it was taking his course and then me and him talking more and more about it. I mean, it was like every week I was like in his, office hours or whatever, and we were like discussing competition law and like, all the really cool things that he had gotten to do, like, as, be an expert for some of the competition cases before the courts and all that. It just made me completely fall in love with it. And I was just so obsessed with it. And it is an area of law that's truly global. So I think that's another reason why I was like, oh, most of the frameworks across the world are very similar. But each authority and enforcement authority around the world sort of might have like a little nuance of how they sort of interpret the law or whatnot, or how they enforce. So yeah, that was kind of like my, oh, okay, I love commercial, but actually I'm going to do competition. Ended up doing my dissertation in competition law, and got put forth by my advisor for a position at a law firm for competition law. But yeah, maybe I stop there unless you want to know what happens next with that, which is I had to move back to Texas because of my visa situation.
Oh, okay. Before we talk about visa situations, because I'm well versed on a difficult visa situation. There's so many amazing things I want to unpack from what you've said so far. Also, just before we go into the whole unpacking about detachment, about what you were saying about conviction, just for anyone who's listening and isn't 100% sure on what competition law is, can you please just make that a bit clear for the audience?
Of course, of course. And sorry, because this is going to be such an oversimplification to, if there is anyone that's listening that is a competition lawyer, they're going to be like, this is too oversimplified. But in the simplest form, I would say it is basically competition law is designed so that consumers aren't harmed and that they have choice. And what that looks like is, say there's like dominant players in the market, it's ensuring that they're not abusing that dominant position, in the market, that distorts the market and then prevents new competition from coming in, and then therefore giving consumers like choice. Which a really good example of that was, you've probably heard about like Google being fined for that. Another way is like, say that the two biggest players in the market are trying to merge. If they merge, then they sort of become dominant in the market. And again, that takes away and that distorts the competition. So it's all about like letting the market sort of do its thing, and like sort of making sure that there is competition, healthy competition, and that consumers are getting the options um, to pick between the different players in the market. So yeah, super oversimplified that.
No, but thank you for sharing. And it makes it look much more kind of easy to understand, and it's nice context to when we progress more in the story. But before we do that, I want to talk to you more about what you were saying about law school, because I think that's something that everyone that's listening will have to face at some point. Like university, I had a similar experience with university applications. I think with job applications, a lot of young people applying for jobs that will be listening to this will have applied to like, especially if you're doing something like finance or law, you have to apply for like 100 internships and you keep hearing no. And so how did you, one, maintain the confidence in yourself that this is something like it's not a personal thing, and not let it shake you, but also in confidence in that this is something that you still want to do, and you still have to like you just have to have faith about in that time where you were getting rejection after rejection and you were moping, as you said.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's such a good question. Look, I would be totally lying if I said that it didn't shake me. It absolutely shook me to my core. But I think I was super, super lucky in that I had community, and this community that was like constantly reminding me that even when I was sort of at my lowest thinking I can't do this, they were like, actually, you can, you already have. It's not an if, it's a when. And so that community was really, really important, really, really strong. And I think it's nice to have people that believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself, and kind of see, even when you're at your worst, they sort of still see the best. And I feel so privileged to have had that, because I think that's so important. And that makes me in turn want to pay that forward for everybody that I come into contact with, by the way, especially at the different stages in their careers. Um, but faith, as you said, that's a huge one, because obviously faith for me has always been a really, really strong part of who I am. And maybe that's part of my community as well. Like my communities instilled that in me as well. But faith for me is all about believing in things that you necessarily can't see. It's all about continuing to believe despite the world tearing you down, saying no, and all of that. And actually, I think the last thing I would say is rejection has become such an actually like beautiful thing for me. Like I never thought I would say that, but and I know it's easier said than done, but rejection is redirection. And for me, it's been such a blessing because the more I get rejected, the more I'm comfortable with it. And the more that I realize that it's actually part of the process. Like if everything that I did, people just said yes, or like, go forth, or, here's exactly what you want. I actually think that none of it would have felt like worth it in a way. Like I think part of it, part of the rejection makes you appreciate when you do get to that point or when you do fulfill that purpose more and more because you didn't just get something handed to you, but you've been through like hoops and bounds to get there, right? So yeah, it's taken me a long time to get there for sure with the rejection, but I would say community faith and like reframing how I view rejection has been the summary.
That's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And
Of course.
I think not only is it so beautiful and personal, but it's also something that people can listen and apply into their own life because it's not only an inevitability that has happened to you and might continue to happen to you at different points of your life, it's something that happens to everyone. I think
Yeah.
it's part and parcel of life, so it's important to learn to renegotiate your relationship with rejection at
Yeah.
whatever phase in your life. So, alongside rejection, you talked about detachment, and you got to go to Italy to do that, and that's beautiful. And I can already picture you like cooking in like in a small Italian like village in a villa or whatever. But apart from the scenery and kind of leaving your physical environment, how have you been able to detach from situations apart from that or as well as that in your life?
Yeah, no, absolutely. First I'll say I'd really try super hard to react to things more logically, at least in the first instance. Like I try not to react to things emotionally right away. I try to take like a grounded, holistic view of like, okay, let me take a step back before I reply. And I think that's a huge thing that I've learned over the years, because one of the things that I always want to try to do is deliver everything with kindness and compassion. And I realize that I can't do that if I'm just reacting right away. So I think that's what I'll say first. But to your other point of, how have I detached? To be honest, I don't know that I have fully, and I don't think that I've like secured it as a skill yet. But I'm working on it. And I think that's part of it, isn't it? It's like a constant dialogue, this like idea of detaching. There's some things I think that I've gotten better over the years of detaching from, but then there's some things that still I struggle. But I think I will say that what has helped me is this idea of like, I don't know if you've heard that saying, but if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive.
Yeah.
So that for me has been such a phrase, such a thought that I come back to every time I'm struggling with detachment. I come back to that and I think, is this something that really feels like it's the end of the world? Like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, I sort of have to talk myself through it. That's like kind of the starting point. Like, am I losing peace over this? If I am, then why? What about it is making me lose peace? Is it fear? Is it, you know, insecurity? Like, what about it is doing that? And then I sort of find myself going down that sort of decision logic tree. But yeah, I find that most of the time with these things with detachment, it's like if you talk yourself through it, you that is part of detaching, isn't it? You're sort of doing it without realizing. Um, so I don't know. That sort of works for me, but I think it is like a constant dialogue. And when I was in Italy, sometimes people look at these things and they're like, well, that's a distraction. But I still think I was doing the work because even though, like you said, I was there with the nice scenery and yes, these really nice culinary distractions, um, I definitely was sort of doing that decision tree or that logic in my mind of like, okay, what's the worst that could happen here? Like, I'm not going to get into law school. It's not the end of the world. What can I do instead? How can I eventually get to law school still? Like, it's not that I can't do it ever. It's just maybe right now is not the right time. Um, and I think going through that process, by the time that my mom showed up in July and I was going to the internet cafe, I had just thought, everything's fine. Like, actually, doesn't matter if I don't get in. Like at that point, I'd already thought, I'm not getting in. It's fine. So yeah, I do think it's a constant dialogue that I'm working on.
Thank you for sharing that again. And I think you're 100% right. It's not something that you kind of get, it's something you have to maintain and learn and continue to keep doing. Another thing that you said that was super powerful was knowing that what you were going to do with the course in Norwich was the right thing for you, despite having all the qualifications to start in Texas, probably having the prestige, the financial backing of like doing all of your stuff in Texas, your community, whatever people are saying, like the kind of conventional route. So how did you stay confident in the fact that you're doing what's the right thing for you despite maybe hearing other advice?
No, absolutely. Oh, such a good question, especially right now. There's so much noise, isn't there? I think we live in this like noise, noisy time. I think for me, honestly, a big part of that was my dad. So my dad, he sort of, my parents have like this incredible power over me in the sense that, they were immigrants. So they went to the US when they were 30 with like $5 in their pocket. Like they left Egypt, their entire family and everything, and like boldly went with conviction to to America and started over and like did it with nothing. So every time I just think back to that. And not only do I have like so much respect for them that I feel like I'll never ever be able to sort of you know, to give or to show. I think my dad instilled that sort of in me, that like feeling of, you know, do do what you think is right, like do what you want to do what you think is right for you, but do it with conviction. And if it turns out for whatever reason that, once you do that and you're like not that happy with it, there's this whole beauty of like being able to still redirect and redesign and change it up, even if you're doing it and I think that's more reason to do it with conviction, right? So do it with conviction because nothing is like permanent in that regard. So I think even for them, like they came to the US, they didn't have anything, they started from scratch, like they went through all these like hardships and obstacles. And I think it's the same. I think for me, I thought, okay, I really want to pursue this. And I think despite what everybody else around me is saying and what they think is right for me, you do sort of know your intuition tells you a little bit differently. And so I think having that instilled in me from a young age because of my dad and like experiencing what him and my mom went through and how they still did it and that courage and that, bravery, that is what sort of like pushed me, I think, further. Because I was thinking, worst case, I get there, I do my master's for a year and it's not like as fruitful maybe as I thought, or maybe it doesn't lead to the different doors that I'm thinking it will open, but it doesn't mean that it will have been for nothing. It will have meant something. This is what that Sandy at that time wanted and needed and knew that she needed to pursue. And I think that is all part of what shapes you, right? Like everything is a bit of a blessing and a lesson in the same way. So yeah, I think that's what kind of gave me a little bit of the courage to just do it.
I love that. And it's so amazing that you have that in your family. And I think how, because you mentioned earlier as well, community being really important to you and how it's kind of a source of energy and inspiration and support. And you talked just now about how your family provided you that kind of reassurance that whatever you do, as long as you do it with conviction, it will be fine. So what gave you this courage to kind of leave your family and go to a different part of the world to start up by yourself? Because I did it as well. I lived alone for a year in a different country, but I think leaving my family was hard. It was
Yeah.
rewarding, and I learned a lot about myself, and it was definitely the right thing to do, but it took a lot of energy. So
Yeah.
how was that for you?
Well, let me tell you, this is just to show like how I didn't deal with it well at the beginning. I remember the very first night that I landed in Norwich. This was after I decided like, hey, I'm moving to the UK for a year, like despite everything. And I called my sister, my older sister, and she will tell you this. I think it was a series of things, right? Like I saw it was during internationals week. So like the international students come like a week before everybody else comes. And here I am, like I hadn't visited the campus before I went. Like I literally just rocked up. Like I'm by myself. I don't know anybody in the country. It's Norwich. So it's like literally not, it's not London. It's like out in the middle of nowhere. And we're on a campus as well. So it's different to Cambridge in that you're in the middle of the city. It's like a campus. So I get there 30 plus hours of traveling from Texas and all this. And I literally called my sister and it was I just remember like crying on, I'm in my dorm room. There's nothing in the dorm room because you're supposed to come with like your pillows and your duvets and stuff. And I'm there with my two black suitcases, and my parents obviously couldn't come help me. And so I'm here by myself in this weird new place. And I just called my sister and I'm just crying. And I'm like, what if I made a mistake? Like, what am I doing here? And my sister was like, no, no, it's fine. She doesn't, I don't even think she remembers this, but like she gave me strength in that moment because she was like, okay, she's like, you just need to like go put yourself out there. And she was like, I know that's the last thing you want to do, but she's like, what's on the schedule? Like, what's on the internationals week schedule? And I was like, oh, they're having like a dinner tonight at the student union. And she was like, I need you to peel yourself off of the floor and I need you to go to that dinner. And she was like, just say hi to like one or two people. That's it. That's all you need to do for tonight. And then that will be the success. And I was like, okay, like managed to get myself together, literally go and stand in line at the student union for this welcome dinner. And I'm not joking, within 3 minutes of me standing in the line, this girl turns around and sticks her hand out and says, hi, I'm Lisa. And I was like, hi, I'm Sandy. And this is one of my best friends until today. This was like 10 years ago. And and we always laugh about it because she tells me now, she's like, I was terrified. She was like, I was so scared. I was so terrified. She was like, I just thought like everybody else is scared. I'm just gonna say hi. And I was like, you have no idea how much comfort it was to like have my sister push me to go to that, but also for me to like have somebody extend their hand out in that moment. So yeah, I think I definitely wasn't fearless in any way by any means when I went. And I think it was really hard at first, but I think like I like I said, that community is amazing. My parents were super supportive of it. My dad was like, as you can imagine, my dad, this like immigrant in the US who's worked so hard his entire life, he was like, my daughter like is gonna be an international lawyer, like she's doing her master's in the UK. Like he was so proud of that. And I think that sort of community, that sort of like that feeling was just something that really helps. And it did help. So I definitely missed them, but I think they were very much like, you need to live your life. You need to like do things. You need to like put yourself out there. And they were so supportive in those moments where I was just terrified.
100%. And also what's beautiful about your story is that it's not like you left your community, you just added to it, because by leaving the US, you were able to meet Lisa and you were able to meet all
Yes.
these new people to add into your life and kind of add new experiences. So that's amazing. And now we've don't talk through all of that. I want to know what happened. So you went to Norwich, you did the year, you got really interested in competition law, and then what happened next?
So I absolutely loved it. And I wanted to stay. I was like, what is the point of me being like having, what was the point of me doing all of that to then just go back to Texas and try to, get a like be an associate at a law firm, for example, which there's nothing wrong with that. But I think, I knew early on that I wanted a little bit more and something different. So I've already gone this non-conventional route. And so I thought I need to supplement this master's with work experience abroad so that if I do go back to the States, I could be like, look, I did my master's, but I also got this incredible experience. At that time, um, I think it was Theresa May. So um, the visa situation was very grim. It was like you literally get 3 or 4 months built into your visa after you finish school. And that was it. And so you're supposed to all of a sudden try to find someone who's going to sponsor you to like work in the country in like 3 months, which anyone who's been through it can tell you that that is like near impossible. People were telling me it is impossible. Like, you can't do it. You won't do it. I'm sorry. And I just thought, again, no, I am going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to try. I'm going to do it. And I ended up doing like loads of like free work placements, literally reached out to anyone and everyone who would listen to me and give me an opportunity to do any type of work experience. Got to do a little bit of stuff at like Clifford Chance and like some of the boutique law firms in Norwich. And I mean, like I said, it was all unpaid, and it was just more for like, is there a way that like I could just get my foot in the door? And despite all of my best efforts, um, January 2016 came around and I had to leave the country because I hadn't secured anything. Um, I hadn't secured a visa, and that was when my visa was expiring. So my friends threw me a deportation party, which was honestly like heartwarming, because it was a joke, right? Like, and I'm not making fun of, obviously, like deportation's terrible, like I wouldn't wish it upon anyone. I wasn't actually getting deported, but they wanted to sort of lighten the mood, and they wanted to celebrate with me like all of these incredible things that happened over the year, like the friendships we had built. And like they all like had this like faith in me where they were like, you're gonna be back, like I know it. And so yeah, we had that, and then I went back to the States. I was in Texas from January 2016 to about August. And I was working at an international trade law firm there, for peanuts, by the way. Like I was a contracting attorney. So I was just like doing like a part-time situation like downtown in Dallas, hearing all the haters be like, see, you shouldn't have done your master's. Like now all of your colleagues that graduated and are Texas qualified have like a year or two experience at law firms and things that you don't. And I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of a difficult time, but in that time, I had my community. So my best friend Dina, me and her were like job hunting together. And I managed to get a position in a law firm in London. So I actually had interviewed for that position during the fall before I left the UK. I went through 3 rounds of interviews for this position, and this position was a step back in a way. It was more of like a legal assistant position, despite me being a qualified lawyer with all these accolades. But it was an antitrust and competition at Norton Rose Fulbright, which is a well-known firm. And I thought, in London, and I was thought, you know what? It's fine. It's a foot in the door. And so I went in and I did my very best, went through the 3 interviews, and then they called me up kind of November. This was the November before I had to leave the UK. And they said, we're really sorry. It was between you and one other guy. And unfortunately, the guy had a little bit more experience. So we went with him. And I was gutted. I was so upset. And then, yeah, went to Texas, was there, all sorts. And I was like, you know what? Wasn't meant to be this and that. Saw the same position pop up while I was in Texas, like in April, May time. Saw that it had crept back up online. I was like, this must be a mistake. Like, this was the position I applied for. And I don't know what came over me, but I literally emailed the partner and I said, hey, is this the same position that I applied with you guys for? And if so, and if it is up again, I'd like to be reconsidered. And they emailed me right away and they said, oh my gosh, yes, we'd love to reconsider you. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go through the interview process again from Texas. Um, but yeah, we'd love to, you know, put you through. And so I went through the entire process again and then had to wait for the visa situation to go through. And then they made me an offer, and I literally was uprooting my life in like 2 weeks in October, like end of September 2016 to London. So yeah, it all worked out.
Wow. How did you, again, it sounds so amazing that you did it, but it also sounds like it would have been tiring. Again, as a young person that's starting to think about the job market and think about getting a job and graduating and all this stuff, interviews and these like long three-stage process interviews can be really fun, but they can also be really fatiguing because often what happens is you get an almost, you get like you get so far through and then you hear like no, and then you got like almost so close and then you didn't get it and then you saw it and then you had to start again and go back. And so how did you maintain that kind of energy and joy and like fun about the whole process rather than thinking, "Oh, like not again," you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely did have those moments where I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, maybe I'm like going, like, I'm fighting like an uphill battle. But like I said, I think community really helped and faith. And oh, man, for every person that was like, you can't, you shouldn't, you won't, I actually just stopped listening to those people. I was like, you don't take advice from people that like you wouldn't like. I always think about it now and I'm like, I'm so glad I didn't listen to those people that said you can't and you won't, because if I did, I feel like I would be in a different state. I would be in a different mentality. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So I think it was a mix of all like the community and the faith, but I think another big thing for me was my creative outlet actually. So my creative outlet, I think so I've always been writing, as I told you before, and I did my literature degree, but I continued to sort of do that anytime. You know what they say, right? They say what's bad for your heart is good for your art. And oh my gosh, that was like so spot on for me. I think every time where I was rejected and upset and hurt, all of a sudden that's when I got like a wave of inspiration to like write something. And I was mostly doing poetry at the time and like thoughts, and I was just jotting them down in my notes section in my phone and you know wherever. And I think that was an outlet for me because it lets you express your feelings and your thoughts and even your misery at moments in a different way that I think is really healthy. So I definitely leaned on that. And I think it's always been a saving grace for me. Like once that happened, I think it fueled me as well into pursuing that as well as my law. You know, in 2015, one of my really good friends submitted some of my work to get published and then was like, surprise. And so I got contacted by this independent magazine and they were like, hey, we'd love to publish these two pieces that you've sent in. And I was like, wait, I didn't send any pieces in. Turns out she had done that. And I think it was that moment when I was in Norwich going through all of this and thinking, oh, I'm not even going to be able to be in the country when that was my first time ever to be published. And it was seeing my name and seeing my piece in the magazine that I was like, this is insane. Like maybe I should pursue this further and like keep doing it. And that helped in those times as well when I needed a bit of new energy and a new like sort of, encouragement. I would just find myself writing and find myself cold pitching and pitching to everybody and everything that would listen. And so yeah, I think that helps. I think having a creative outlet really helps.
Wow. And I love that. And it's so, because again, like I know you now and your journey. And so hearing all of the background context makes it even more powerful because seeing how
Oh,
far you've
thank you.
come like as a person, as a lawyer, as a writer. So please, can you tell the listeners what happened? You moved to London 8 years ago, and what happened? How did you get more into writing? What happened with the law work? And tell us the
Yeah.
rest. What happens with the story?
So London was a bit of a shock to the system, as you can imagine, being a Texas girl. And my first year in London, again, I was like, did I make a mistake? Because I remember getting on the underground for the first time, and people literally don't make eye contact. And I come from Texas where everybody's super friendly. Like you say morning to your strangers, your neighbors, like people are just a lot more, in tune with each other. And so to go from that kind of environment where there's like warmth to like what felt in London at the time in 2016, was just like dark and like everybody is always in a rush. And like you're like, where are you even going? Like, why is everybody in a rush all the time? Like, no eye contact, no, I can't tell you how many times I've cried on public transport and no one bats an eye. And I'm like, that is problematic, But yeah, so my first year was like a little bit of a struggle. I didn't have the community. I didn't know anybody when I moved to London. So I was working these crazy hours at the law firm, like trying to prove myself and like trying to really focus on that. And then I had some friends still in Norwich, which was comforting, but I was trying not to let myself go to Norwich every weekend or every other weekend because I thought I need to like stay in London and I need to like find what works for me. So I tried. I basically was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try to like just do the things that I love. And hopefully, at every single thing that I do, an event that I go to, if I just am there, I'm going to find like-minded people because they're also at that event. And I'm going to just try to talk to like one or two people, right? And that's just what I did. And I think it was interesting because so once I got published in that magazine, um, I thought, you know what, they don't have anybody in London. And I know that this is a bit like crazy, but what if I just ask them if they need someone on the ground in London, like to help with stuff? And so that's what I proposed. And the editor in chief at the time was like, that is a fantastic idea. Obviously, this is all like on a volunteer basis. So it's like I was doing it because I wanted to do it. Um, and she was just like, yeah, do you want to cover London Fashion Week? And I was like, are you serious? Do I want to cover London Fashion Week? I mean, that was like a big dream of mine and something that I had said, to my best friend Dina, who I'd mentioned from Texas for like the last 20 something years. Like me and her always said, like, we're gonna go to New York Fashion Week, we're gonna go to London Fashion Week, we're gonna do these things. And so here's this opportunity where she's like, this is what we need from you if you want to do it. And like this person giving me this opportunity. And I thought, oh my gosh, yes, I'm going to do it. I want to take it. So I went in all starry-eyed, just taking in everything as it was coming. And there were those moments were the things that sort of made everything else a little bit easier to swallow in terms of like I'm away from my parents, like work was insane. My law job, I was there till 2 a.m. Like, trying to prove myself. Things were crazy. I was crying because of work, but then here I am at the same time, like this duality, this beautiful duality of like, yeah, but look, my writing career is even just by a little bit is like, furthering or progressing because I get to now do this incredible life highlight. And I will never forget that because that was sort of like a little bit of my entry into that whole world. Because one thing leads to another, doesn't it? So it's like all of a sudden I did the one fashion week, and it was like from the one fashion week, you pick up so much and absorb so much knowledge and info, and you meet kind of the community. And so then once you meet them, you sort of know people. And I just flung myself fully into it because I was like, what if I never get to come again? Let's do it fully. And it was at that same time, too, that I had this even crazier thought of, do you know what? No one's actually listening or replying when I cold pitch about stories and stuff. What if I put myself on the other side of it? Like, I want to experience the PR side and I want to know what happens on that side so that it makes me more of like a more well-rounded like writer and pitcher and etc. So then I like ended up volunteering at like this tiny boutique PR firm, literally mostly doing like data and emails. Um, but I learned so much. Like I cannot even tell you how much I learned. And that's the thing is like you just have to like put yourself in everything at every point and just hope for the best. Know that it's all going to be a blessing and a lesson. And yeah, so that's kind of what increased like me doing more in the writing space while I was still doing law. And obviously, after my first year, things got a lot better in London. I started to sort of find my feet, met people, had more of a community, and like also just started to sort of maybe the right word is detach. Um, so yeah, it feels like full circle now.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And it's amazing hearing you and also just seeing you light up when you talk about writing and London Fashion Week and how it's something that you got to do that you kind of almost manifested for yourself from childhood. And it's awesome. And it's also really cool that you use that energy rather than because I was going to ask you, how did you stop getting from being burnt out? Because I think what you said about London being anonymous, being overwhelming, being nonstop is very true. I think London is a bit of a cruel mistress. I've lived there for a while as well now,
It
so
is.
I can say that it's it gives you so many opportunities, um, but you have to run after those opportunities, and sometimes running can be a bit exhausting.
Yeah.
So, how did you, because you said you were working at the firm until 2 a.m., like how did you ensure that you were taking care of yourself physically and mentally so that you could keep sustaining and growing and changing and adjusting into your life in London?
Yeah, I mean, I still think that I'm like working on that, if I'm honest. Like, again, I think that that has been a work in progress. Like, my friends will tell you, I am the absolute worst when it comes to the balance aspect of like, there's habits I have that aren't the best. Like, for me to pursue all those things that I loved simultaneously, there was a lot of times, and still even today, that I compromised on sleep, for example. And that's not really taking care of myself. However, the way that I justify it, and maybe this is girl math, um, but the way that I justified it was like, this stuff is feeding my soul. So in a way, like they always say, like, do something that feeds your soul, something that like, you know, feeds your wallet, and something that feeds your, yeah, oh, your mind. Okay. Because I was like, my health definitely wasn't being fed. However, technically it was because something that like this that could feed my soul, it got me so inspired and excited that like I was sort of, I think there was an increase in like adrenaline, and it gets you excited about everything else. Like I always think like we're not designed to just do one thing in our lives. And I think the people that have duality, like those are the people I really, really admire because I think it's such a beautiful thing to be able to do multiple things. And I'm not saying like burn out by any means. And I'm saying definitely have healthier and better habits than I do. I'm still figuring it out. I have gotten better, but yeah, I found myself like in the moments where like work was really stressful and really tough from like in the legal perspective. I found that I was like really like creatively enjoying the stuff outside of work. And then vice versa. Like sometimes the creative stuff was actually a bit draining because there is that side to the creative world as well. And when that stuff was super draining, it's like I had this privilege of sort of, jumping back into this intellectual like corporate world, which again, like just feeds you in a different way, right? So yeah, I think that's probably why I haven't felt the burnout, but then I have, like I have at times felt it. And I think either my body shuts down because it's like, hey, pay attention to me. And that's when I need to reevaluate. Um, or I think there's been moments where I've thought, is this really like what I want? Like, is this really what this version of me right now wants? And if it's not, you sort of have to have that conversation, that honest conversation with yourself, and then you sort of redesign and reframe the structure. So yeah, I don't know if anyone's got that down perfectly. People do say, they're like, how do you have time to do all of it? I think they're like, time is a construct, isn't it? Like, I think if you want to do it, you will do it and you can do it. And there's different ways to do everything that you want. And that's why I'm always like encouraging people to just do it. Part of the problem is that people are usually just too scared or they don't know where to start.
Super powerful. And what you were saying of people sometimes are too scared to start something, and so
Mm.
they use excuses. What is something that you were scared of starting that you started, or something that you're scared of starting that you haven't started, but maybe you're considering to?
Oh, this is such a timely question. So I'm in this stage right now where, I've been here for like 8 years. I do feel like I've built a community. Specifically, I'm talking now about the creative side. So I feel like ha am not 100% established in my legal career. Like, I have been a lawyer, I know what I'm doing, but I think that part of my career is constantly changing, and it will, and I think it will evolve. And I'm just sort of letting go and letting God with that at the moment. But then when it comes to my creative, I think there's this whole thing right now. I think it was over really the last year. I've had a couple of different people say to me, why don't you start your own thing? And they mean some sort of like creative consultancy or a magazine or like a creative studio or something of that like nature. They're like, you've got like 8+ years of experience, not just from an editorial side, but like a production side, from like a creative event planning and throwing side, like bringing community together. You do also have that legal layer that you can introduce, because a lot of creatives unfortunately lack, or they need that sort of element as well. So I've had people sort of suggest to me like, why don't you start your own thing? And I don't know. I don't know if I'm making excuses, or if I'm not ready, or I don't know what it is, but that is a point, that's something right now where I think this question is so timely, because I wouldn't say that I'm scared. I think I just don't know what I want yet. Like, maybe I haven't created the purpose around that and shaped it like in a way where I feel so strongly, or I feel with conviction to just go for it. Um, and I don't know, maybe that's an excuse. Maybe that's me giving you an excuse right now, but yeah, I'm at that stage right now, and I think we're just gonna have to wait and see. I'm taking it. I'm trying to take it like very intentionally and very sort of. I don't want to put force on it. I want it to be organic. Like, the seed has been planted, right? So it's like, what's next? Um,
100%. And what you said about timing is so important, because from what you said about your journey so far, conviction and following your passions has always been a really big part of it. So I don't think that that is a thing. I think sometimes you have to wait for the right season for something
yeah,
to grow. You can plant, like you
yeah,
said, you can plant the seed, but it's not going to grow if it's
yeah.
winter. And so I think
Can
that's really important.
I was gonna say, can I also be honest with you? I always feel like, why is there, I'm not saying that I shouldn't do it, but I'm like, why is this pressure there, even that like that should be the next step? Because like, if I look at my life right now and I see all the things that I'm doing, and like, you know, the the writing, like I want to increase the different publications I'm writing for example, and like there's all these like little pockets of progression that I still see and I still value and I still want to pursue. So it's not like I'm feeling like unfulfilled, that I then need to go and like think about what's next and I actually really love my life. So I think whatever is next with that needs to sort of complement or add on to this, not make me feel like I'm taking away from any of this, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's a really powerful way of looking towards future goals and planning. And I think that's a really beautiful and honorable thing that you shared. And it's hopefully going to resonate with people listening that you don't have to completely do a 360 on your life for you to be making progress. If you're happy with where you are and you want us to keep growing and progressing, you can still do that by little micro wins and doing like just adding kind of enhancements to where you are. I mean, obviously, that's not the case for someone that wants to completely fundamentally change where they are in life. But if that's not you, then
Yeah.
why is that conversation? Speaking of publications, can you tell the audience a little bit about where you've been writing? And then I want to talk about 511 as well, but tell us a little bit. So you've written for Teen Vogue, and so many other cool publications. So what has that been like?
Honestly, a dream. I never ever would have thought or imagined that like I would get the opportunity to. I obviously always wanted to, but I think I don't know. It's one of those things where like you every time I get my first byline somewhere, it is an emotional thing. Like it never gets old and I never like don't think of it as like a big thing. Like I remember it was 2021 in July when I got my first Teen Vogue byline, and my best friend Marina was at my apartment, and I think we knew that it was going to be published that day or the day before, or something like that. And she was there, and I just saw, like, I saw it for the first time. Like, it was my first piece for Teen Vogue. My name was there. And I'm not joking. Like, I just sat there and cried. And like we were working from home that day and like it was lunchtime, but she was like, "Oh my God, I'm pouring you like a drink right now. We need a toast. Like this is." And honestly, like I've been so lucky and privileged in the sense that like my community has always, always, always supported my delusional ideas or like my things that are like, sometimes I'll be like, I'm going to write for British Vogue, which by the way, I still have been saying, and one of these days I will. But, at one point it was like, I grew up reading Teen Vogue. So for me, that was like such a big thing, like to see my name in a byline for Teen Vogue. Like I thought, wow, like 13-year-old Sandy right now would just think you are the coolest person in the world. Um, and yeah, so I think that was really, really cool. I think what that did for me, because so before that, like obviously I was telling you I first got published in 2015, but it wasn't until like I'd say 2017, 2018 that I started to write more and more for different publications. So I started out really by writing for that one independent one, Hours, which is no longer around anymore, unfortunately, but it was a really cool independent magazine about for the I think the tagline was like for the creatively curious or something like that, which I loved. But yeah, so they sort of stopped operating, which was unfortunate. But then I started writing for Maud magazine, which has also stopped. These independent magazines, I tell you, like it's so hard to like maintain, for years or whatnot. But anyway, so yeah, I ended up writing for Maud, and then I just flung myself into new avenues by like pitching to different ones. So I was like, I really would love to pitch somewhere that's like a bit more like interviews. So I pitched Shun magazine and started writing for them, which was amazing, and met one of like my really close friends now, who was my editor at the time, Sarah. And she was great. Like she was the one that like sort of made me believe in myself more and more. Like so I was pitching for Shun, but then she was like, she's also a freelance writer on top of being an editor. And so me and her were always talking about like publications we want to write for, and ones that she had written for. And I was just in awe of her. So that just increased like my remit. So then I started pitching for like Wonderland and like Notion and, um, yeah, Teen Vogue, obviously. And I think on the back end of Teen Vogue, I was like, I want to try all the Condé Nast publications. So I started pitching. I've been pitching for British Vogue for years. Haven't gotten that one yet, but like watch this space. Also, GQ would be cool. But yeah, so for me now, it's like a case of every year I have this goal for myself to write for like 2 new publications. And that's just a way for me to be like more creatively curious and stay curious, but also as a writer, I think it like is a good way for you to like diversify who you're writing, like the audience. It's always a challenge when you have like this new audience and like a new framework and stuff, and it just gets me like re-excited and re-energized. And so yeah, and then in 2020, I got stuck in Texas for like 5 months during the pandemic. And honestly, like 2020 was good for my art because in that year alone, I must have written, no joke, like 50 pieces. Like it was crazy. And during that year is when I pitched uh for 511, and I did my first piece with 511, which is a London-based fashion and luxury publication with a global audience. I pitched them online, ended up doing a piece with them in 2020, and then after I did that piece, the editor-in-chief Edwin, who's now a good friend of mine, was like, "Hey, like, would you be interested in doing more?" I was like, "Absolutely, I'd love to." So the next issue, I like did something else for them, and it wasn't until I like came back to London in 2021 that me and him met in person, and we realized like, oh my gosh, we actually have so much in common and like hit it off. And he's the editor in chief, but he's also a professional photographer and he's the founder of 511. So just incredibly hardworking, super creative. And I think it was just really nice to like meet somebody that if you pick up the publication, I know you have, and you've done a lot with us already. The publication is like a work of art, and it is one of the few like independent publications that still puts a lot of the emphasis on print, and we're biannual in print, so we put out twice a year in print and the rest is online. um, but the actual magazine itself is like just beautiful. It's all content. There's absolutely no advertisements in your traditional advertising sense. So yeah, in my mind, I was like, I would love to continue to contribute for this London fashion based um, magazine, while I'm also writing for these other magazines that are sort of like challenging me in different ways. So yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing all of that. And it's amazing how you challenge yourself to do two new publications every year, because not only from a networking perspective is that amazing, but also, like you said, diversifying your artistic voice, sharpening your blade as a writer, trying different things, sharpening your pen, maybe, I don't know, is a better way to put it. But I think that's really cool. And I want to know more about five. I mean, I know firsthand because I've done some stuff with your team, but I want to share more with the audience about 511 and the newest edition that came out recently, and the process, because it was truly a very global process, and I think that's awesome. So can you please talk to the listeners how that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So 511 has had so like the publication's been around now for like 5 years, but I think given that the first 1.5 years was in lockdown, it didn't really have the opportunity to sort of have its coming out into the London industry. That's not to say now, like after 5 years, I think people do know 511, especially in London, and all these big brands as well that we've worked with and had the opportunity to work with. They do know it. But yeah, so I think we've had like various growth over the time that I've been with the magazine. Like when I first came in, I think we were on issue 5 or 6, and it wasn't until the ninth issue. Like, can you imagine? It wasn't until the ninth issue that we had like paid sponsors. So you can imagine when I say like this is a labor of love, like it's a small team of like 10, and everybody's got full-time jobs and they do this on the side. So none of us are being paid. And that's like taboo, I think, in the creative world, but you can really just see how people are so passionate in putting out this beautiful work. It obviously it would be so nice for all of us to get paid, but it's not even about that. For us, it's like if we do have the paid sponsors for the editorial, then everybody gets paid and it is fair. But what I'm trying to say is that the ninth issue was a huge like win. you know, we had our first like proper event into the space, and that was like a, hey, we're 5'11", like this is who we are. And then we had our sponsors. So like we teamed up with Penhaligon's, which is huge for us. Like there's so much alignment there. It being a luxury perfume brand with such a great prestigious like reputation. So yeah, like from the ninth issue, I would say we keep sort of like meeting our expectations, but then exceeding them. And I think everybody in the team could say like that's just so not what we were expecting, but like we just take everything and we just take everything as a win, and we're just so happy and we just want to do more. So that's kind of what led to issue 12. So issue 12 is the one that you're talking about, which just came out at the beginning of July. That issue was like 9 months in the making, which is bizarre because we usually have like less than 6 months to put out each issue. But this one, we started at the end of last year, like planning it out. And the idea was our editor-in-chief, Edwin, he has always loved traveling, or history really, but like he's hated traveling. Like he doesn't have like a phobia of flights, but it's not, he's not particularly, he doesn't enjoy flying, for example. So anyway, but he loves history and he's always wanted to like visit these places and stuff. So the idea came, and all of a sudden he was pitching this idea to us as a team and saying, the theme is going to be the Silk Road. And he's like, I want us to travel along the countries of the Silk Road, and I want us to capture all the cultures and like the beauty of these cultures and things. I want to capture the voices and the talent of those areas, and I want to shoot the stories while we're there. And so it was incredibly ambitious, but like here we were, and we were like, okay, we're doing it. And it was 9 months, and I cannot tell you, like it was a lot. It was super, super difficult because I think a lot of us were going through personal like obstacles, but then at the same time we were like trying to deliver and give this like beautiful theme the justice that it deserves. So it was definitely difficult, but I think, you know, obviously we made it through, and I think we're more than happy with what came out. Like honestly, it exceeds anything I think that we thought it could have been. But basically it is 700 pages, which is the first because our previous issues are like between 200 and 400. So this issue is 700 pages. It comes in 2 volumes because of how big it was. We couldn't put it in one. And yeah, it covers, I think, 10 plus countries. Different parts of the team got to go to different countries and sort of cover it. So I got to produce slash like be in Egypt and curate the entire Egypt chapter, which is like 70 something pages of like beautiful editorial work. And that was such a big thing for me because I'm Egyptian, and having grown up in the US, like my parents have always wanted to instill like not get us to forget like where we come from and who we are. And like for me, being able to give back to Egypt in the way that I feel I know best, like which is for me my writing and my creative outlet, that for me was like a different type of love letter. And obviously there's like a little bit of selfishness in that, like me being able to do that, but I did not take it lightly. I wanted to do it the justice it deserved, and I knew that we were just scratching the surface of such an incredible place. Honestly, the whole issue could have just been Egypt, you know, like this place with thousands of years of history and civilization and stuff. So, but yeah, so I got to go to Egypt, which is incredible. We did that in January, and then basically from then, different parts of the team went to different parts of the world, and our editor-in-chief went traveling from March to May, and he did most of Asia. So he was nonstop traveling, from Japan to like Hong Kong, mainland China, Seoul, did all of that and was shooting on site in those places. There's certain places we obviously couldn't visit. One of the most beautiful places I think that part of our team got to go, Ashley, was Georgia. So the Georgia piece was beautiful, and we had this like incredible top model who's on the cover and amazing. Kazakhstan was amazing. So yeah, different parts got to go to different places, and me and our fashion editor got to go to Italy. We got to do Rome, and we got to do the most incredible exclusive story with Fendi. Again, life highlight. Never did I think. And that one was hilarious because I remember the fashion editor like calling me and being like, "Hey, do you want to come to Rome? And oh, by the way, like, do you want to interview the archivist at the Fendi headquarters?" And I was like, "What?" First of all, thank you. And second of all, like, yes, I would love to do this with you. And like I said, there were a lot of like difficult things along the way, obstacles, but we did it. And I think we learned a lot about each other. We learned a lot about ourselves. And I think the issue is just a complete life highlight, not just for me, but I think for other members of the team. Like when we look at it, like I remember the editor in chief, we were doing this pop-up exhibition at Spitalfields of the issue for 2 days after the launch, which again was incredible. Um, and we were there on the Wednesday night before the pop-up, putting the stuff on the wall for the exhibit. And I remember my editor-in-chief, Edwin, walking in, and it was the first time that I was seeing and holding the issue. And he just handed it to me. And I'm not joking. Again, I just started crying. Like I held it in my hands and I was like, I just couldn't believe that like we made this. Like we made this, and like it's not even about us. It's about, look at all these like amazing cultures, and like look at all the things that like teach us about each other, and how these different cultures sort of like come together and operate, and how we like, yeah, I don't know, it was just so beautiful. And I held it and I just thought, wow, like I can't even believe that like we did this. So it was a moment. But anyway, all of that, now I'm rambling, was to say like this was the 12th issue and this was our biggest and best issue yet. And I think we keep saying that with every issue that comes out. And it's just so nice to be part of something that does that and that evokes that in me, and hopefully our readers when they pick up the issue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as someone who's looked at the magazine firsthand and got to be part of the launch, it is a work of art. And I'm gonna
Thank you.
link it down in the show notes for people if they want to see it and access it and everything, which would be amazing. And I look forward to seeing what the team do and also what you do in the future as a writer and as a creator and as a lawyer and as this amazing multi-hyphenate woman. To wrap up, I want to ask you, because you've touched on throughout this conversation many things that you did that younger you would have dreamed of, like London Fashion Week, like Teen Vogue, like going to Egypt, being able to celebrate and showcase your culture and your country. If you could go back and tell your younger self how things would turn out, what would you say and what advice would you give?
That's a good question. You know, I probably wouldn't tell myself that things are going to work out, because I would want to go through the journey exactly how I've gone through it with all the hardships. Because like I said, it makes me appreciate everything times 10 more now. But I guess I would say like the advice I would give myself is just don't block out the noise and don't waste time believing or letting people tell you like what you should and shouldn't be doing, and what you can and can't do. Because even though I feel like I have tried to live by that and I have tried to do that, um, I think there's moments where I didn't believe that, and I didn't know it was going to be okay. So I think I would just tell my younger self to like just keep, like, do what you want to do, keep doing it, and like do it all with conviction. um because it is all going to be like it's all going to be for the best. It's all going to shape you. It's all going to like contribute to like where you're supposed to be and how you're supposed to be, into like everything. So yeah, I wouldn't want to know that it was all going to work out, because I think that would have like made me make slightly different decisions. I'm glad that it's worked out exactly how it has, even though there were some really difficult points. Um, but yeah, I guess, yeah, just the takeaway to everybody else as well is yeah, just don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't or what you should and shouldn't, because when you start believing that as the truth, it really, really prevents you from unlocking your true potential.
Wow, that's so powerful. And I also think it's so unique. I love that perspective. And I think, as brilliant as it sounds looking backwards, I think it's even brilliant looking forwards because there's still so much more of the story to unravel. And so I think taking that excitement and that optimism to the future, and hopefully in a few years we can have a follow-up conversation and we can talk about all of the more amazing, crazy stuff that's happened since. I always end this podcast on the theme of gratitude. So what are you grateful for today?
Everything. As cliche as that sounds, I would say if we're going to loop this back, make it full circle, I would say community, faith, and rejection. That's what I'm grateful for. And I'm
Wow.
also super grateful that you've given me the space to talk about all this, and thankful that you really like emphasize the importance on this kind of thing, and for taking the time and to just having this chat. Really grateful for that.
Well, thank you for making the time to have this chat. I'm gonna link everything down below, but where can everyone find you?
You can find me on Insta at the Sandikin, or you could find my writing at www.sandyaziz.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for everything today. You truly are an empowering and inspiring woman.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. I really hope that you liked it. Let me know what you think and comment down below. Also, reach out to me if you have any questions. And also, I want to know what you want to hear and what kind of interviews you want and what kind of solo episodes you want. So please reach out on the podcast Instagram at Empower Sounds, and I will see you next week.